From the hard questions.
Had there been early detection of the rising waters and sirens, we may have been able to leave in time to get to higher ground safely.
To the hard work of healing.
How are we going to rebuild?
Weeks after the deadly flood, Scripps News investigates what went wrong and what is going right. With an emotional journey down the Guadalupe River, where precious memories that were swept away are now being rescued, restored, and returned.
We're going to be there.
And we celebrate the spirit of a community that was battered but never broken. You, our viewers, open your hearts and wallets, so we're here to show you how your generosity is making a difference. This is a Scripps News special report, Texas flood tragedy, the aftermath. Welcome to Kerrville, Texas, where just weeks ago, a devastating flood ripped through this community, tearing up buildings, tossing cars around like toys, and most importantly, taking precious lives, so many of them young. I'm Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra, and in this special report, we will take a hard look at what we have learned since that terrible storm and whether officials are doing enough to make sure the failure to warn never happens again. But we're also going to celebrate the spirit of the Texas Hill Country community, proving every day that through the pain and hardship, kindness, generosity, and perseverance can do remarkable things. But we begin this evening with the hard questions. Were residents adequately warned about the fast rising floodwaters? Could more have been done to prevent the devastating loss of life? And now that the tragedy is over, what does this community need in order to build back? That examination was in full display this morning as Texas lawmakers heard testimony from residents impacted by the flooding. The hearing was a rare moment where citizens of the country's second largest state were able to hear directly from their elected leaders.
In my view, no alert system would have changed the outcome or prevented the tragic loss of life that was upriver. By the time the true danger became clear, the monitoring our office was in full mode, rescuing residents and visitors.
3 people are still missing and more than 130 are dead. That has prompted many in Kerr County, one of the state's hardest hit areas, to question why they were not alerted about the potential threat earlier. Since the disaster in Texas's Hill Country unfolded on July 4th, our Scripps News investigative team has been piecing together why a community in Flash Flood Alley was so unprepared when deep, deadly water began rising. With the search for the missing reaching an end, Kerr County, Texas begins digging out, hauling away debris, and memorializing lives lost, all while waiting for answers to mounting questions about the staggering level of loss here and whether those in power could have done more to keep people out of harm's way. The sudden swelling of the Guadalupe River to raging levels caught so many by surprise. We now know Kerr County was never able to build a modern flood warning system with water gauges and sirens that officials here long knew they needed. It was just last year this Kerr County hazard assessment uncovered by Scripps News said it is likely that Kerr County will experience a flood event in the next year. Yet that same document lists a local flood warning system as a deferred project. Local leaders have not yet answered questions about why the county wasn't better equipped to handle a flash flood, such a well-known threat.
We ask for patience in this.
I've been getting death threats. Can you imagine? And people cursing us for decisions that we never had a chance to make, and they're just playing a blame game.
There's people in it.
We do know the National Weather Service sent out flood warnings in the hours before the disaster, but they were not enough. With so few people owning a weather radio and weak cell service in this rural area, preventing wireless alerts from going through. Even the mayor of Kerrville says he did not receive timely notice.
I individually did not receive a warning in time.
First responder audio obtained by Scripps News and first reported by Texas Public Radio reveals a firefighter asking for alerts to go out on the county's code red system that would have lit up cell phones. It's 4:22 a.m.
We still have water coming up. The Guadalupe Shoemaker sign is now underwater on Highway 39. Is there any way we can send a code red out to our Hunt residents asking them to find higher ground or stay home?
10-4 standby. We have to get that approved with our supervisor.
But there is no evidence of Kerr County sending out any notifications right away, even as the magnitude of the tragedy becomes clear.
I have a lady, she's frantic. She said her children are on top of one of the cabanas and they're trapped.
Scripps News has learned Kerr County leaders twice sought funding to build their own flood warning program. After severe flooding in 2015, Kerr County applied for a FEMA grant to pay for a flood alert system. But the Texas Division of Emergency Management tells Scripps News it blocked the application essentially because of a paperwork issue. Kerr County failed to file a hazard mitigation plan required by federal law to get funding. The county tried again in 2018, but bad timing. That year, money was reserved for counties recovering from Hurricane Harvey's devastation. Over the years, aside from paying for an engineering study that found Kerr's existing warning system to be antiquated and not reliable, commissioners never approved spending any of the county's own funds to install sirens or other life-saving equipment. One commissioner in 2016 saying this whole thing is a little extravagant for Kerr County. As for the federal government, documents obtained by the Scripps News investigative team show FEMA taking steps that downplayed the chance of a flood at Camp Mystic, where 27 campers and counselors died July 4th. Records show FEMA repeatedly approving Camp Mystic's appeals to remove buildings designated on FEMA maps as being in the 100-year flood warning areas. That meant less scrutiny and oversight as Camp Mystic grew. These Google Earth images show dramatic expansion, a bare area at the camp in 2019, a year later, new buildings near Cypress Creek. Camp director Dick Eastland died in the flood. Other camp leaders have not responded to our questions about why they challenged the FEMA flood maps. Scripps News has also confirmed it took 3 days for FEMA to dispatch its own search and rescue teams to help other responders pull survivors to safety. Frustration about that delay reportedly led FEMA's urban search and rescue chief to resign. And as investigations and reviews of the tragedy get underway, an unsettling reality sinks in. Loss of life may have been inevitable with such a fast, powerful flood, but missteps along the way may have made this tragedy far worse. Well, let's get now some insight into how the federal government responds to these types of disasters. Joining us now, Craig Fugate, former administrator for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, from 2009 to 2017. Mr. Fugate, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
First, as a state emergency manager and then as a federal one, you have helped in these types of disasters for decades. Curious to know what stands out to you about this horrific flood.
Well, it's the loss of life. And as you're pointing out, you're getting bits or pieces from a lot of different sources. And the problem that I see, and I've told people before, we don't really have a good system in our disaster response to go back and ask what really happened, why did it happen, and what we're going to do differently. We run into the realities that so many different levels of government are either deflecting blame or are protecting their interest or are not really aware of what all was going on. And that's why we've recommended, many of us have recommended, we need something similar to the National Transportation Safety Board that investigates plane crashes and other types of transportation incidents, just for disasters, a National Disaster Safety Board that would be independent of all the agencies, to go in and ask the hard questions, but not so much focus on, is there somebody to blame, as to understand what happened. Very important to understand why it happened, and are there things we can do differently before the next event? Because as tragic as this was, this will not be the only time this happens.
That's really interesting because the NTSB, of course, is such a powerful voice when it comes to transportation crashes. This board that you're proposing, what exactly would it have as far as authority? Could it tell a state that it needs to do X, Y, and Z, or exactly how much teeth would something like that have?
Well, if you go back to the National Transportation Board, their teeth is in the ability to subpoena and have investigators go in and subpoena, interview, and get the information. but the National Transportation Safety Board can only make recommendations. It's up to the FAA and other regulatory agencies to implement them. But because it's independent and because it's based upon impartiality, they are not part of any, they report to Congress, but they're not part of the executive branch. Their job is to get to what happened and make recommendations.
And Mr. Fugate, quickly, I was curious to know what you think about FEMA's own performance in this flood event, and do you have any concerns about how prepared FEMA is for a future disaster? We are right now approaching hurricane season.
Well, if you looked at this from the standpoint of local and state resources, and as tragic as this is, the reality is most of these events are managed at the state and local level. By the time FEMA gets there, it's usually past the point of life-saving. You're often in a recovery mode. And whether or not the teams move fast enough, I think that's, again, why you need to have a National Disaster Safety Board. Because I'm not in those meetings. I didn't hear what the state was requesting. I don't know what decisions were being made or why they were being made. We're seeing some of the, reports, but we're getting only pieces of that. And that's, again, why I default back to, if you're not in the room when the decisions are made, it's really hard to understand why they got made. You need to have something that can come in, like a National Disaster Safety Board, to ask some really tough, hard questions and find out, was this appropriate? Was it something that could have been done differently? And more importantly, what are we going to do differently next time?
Craig Fugate, former administrator of FEMA, thank you so much for your time. And we have so much more to tell you about the resilience of Texans that live along the Guadalupe River. Coming up, we'll talk to a mother whose kids were at camp in Hill Country and the hours of dread she went through before finding them safe. Plus, one person taking it upon herself to collect the items left behind by the rushing water and how she's trying to reconnect each piece to its owner. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Kerrville, Texas, where this time weeks ago that killer storm dumped feet of rain upriver and the Guadalupe was preparing to burst at its banks to devastating effect. It was a worst-case scenario that brought out the best in America. They came from all over. Gulf Search and Rescue, a devoted and highly trained all-volunteer swift water boat team spending days searching the river for the living and the dead. A canine team from North Carolina, one of many sent from 10 different states, dogs doing the work only they can do. And from as far away as Israel, Zaka International, sadly so experienced in conflict rescue and recovery, using those hard-won skills in the service of this community. And when that difficult work was done, a final accounting of the lives that were lost at the memorial wall in photographs, flowers, mementos. 135 souls lost in Texas Hill Country, 107 of them here in Kerr County, 27 of those from Camp Mystic. 3 people still listed as missing. And right now we are joined amid the destruction to tell us more about a small group of volunteers taking on the painstaking task of recovering and returning the remnants of people's lives one item at a time. Scripps News Group's Michael Anthony Adams, who has spent the last few days here on the ground where a community's healing is unfolding in the most unexpected places. Michael Anthony Adams joins us now with that story. And Michael, what did you find out?
I mean, it was really amazing, Patrick, to see how these women were taking the belongings they found on the Guadalupe River and returning them back to the community.
This one's gonna take a lot of love to get clean. A lot of love.
More than 100 people were killed here in Kerr County when the Guadalupe River overflowed during the July 4th weekend. And as the community begins to rebuild, some of the most urgent recovery work isn't being done along the riverbanks. It's actually happening at places like this, a local car wash.
That's why I said the river doesn't want to let go of these clothes. It just holds on. It just holds on, holds on. Does not want to let go.
Dondi Person is the founder of Found on the Guadalupe River, a volunteer group dedicated to reuniting flood survivors with whatever the water left behind in its wake.
You think about the sheer force it took to get it deep in the clothes. It's going to take that much to get it out. All right, is that it, guys?
What began as a simple Facebook group in the days after the flood has
Hey there,
grown
how's it
into a
going?
network of nearly 50,000 people from all across the country.
I think that almost all the people that go there are just looking for a piece of hope and a story and a piece of before, like I call it before. Something to remember before all of it happened. And that's when things were normal, and that's when, kids would play and families would get together and we'd have our everyday laundry and dinner and all those things before. Oh, yeah.
Once the clothes are power washed, they're hauled to a nearby laundromat, soaked, washed again, and dried. Between rinse cycles, Dondi and her team are scanning the Facebook feed, searching through hundreds of photos and comments and connections, anything that might help match a piece of someone's life with the person who lost it.
He did so good. Yay. I hope we get to find his owner.
Washing the river out of these belongings is only part of the task. A much heavier piece of the recovery unfolds inside an old building on the edge of town.
These items came from the sheriff's department. We have organized them and put them in tubs based on what type they are. These are items that are labeled, ready to go, and ready to be reunited. Back here we have paper goods, like anything that's archival paper is here. For instance, this is a Bible. There's like letters, Mom, I love you. Things that we want to try to save as preserve. So these are all not on the list.
The warehouse isn't just a place for sorting and storage. It's where stories find their way in, often through phone calls.
Is that found on the Guadalupe website?
That's me. Yes.
Okay.
Dondi gets them daily. People searching for a life vest, a photo album, a child's favorite toy.
So you lost some things in the flood, is that correct?
But sometimes the calls carry something painful. The voice of someone who's lost almost everything, asking if anything was found.
I just got off the phone with a dad. I just thought it was a person calling just to find things. I'm like, well, do you have something you're missing, sir? And just my kids, Oh, God. Every one of us that live in Texas Hill Country, we're connected through the river. I knew that I had to get it here and help my neighbors and help facilitate this reunion of fragments of life. That there is some comfort in that, and there is some hope by returning to the river and acknowledging what happened here, honoring those fragments, honoring those pieces that were left behind. I think that that's just part of healing.
Such important work. And Michael, you were mentioning that this network actually stretches all across the country.
Yeah, and one thing you have to remember is a lot of people that were here that weekend were campers, youth campers who'd come here for summer camp. And so belongings that they're finding that aren't residents, they're sending them out in the mail as far as New Jersey, Wisconsin, all over the country.
Michael Anthony Adams, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Patrick.
We'll be right back. The cost in lives and property in this area is immense. And Scripps News reached out to our viewers to help, asking you to donate to the Scripps Howard Fund to help the people and businesses here get back on their feet. And boy, did you respond. In just 2 weeks, you donated over $92,000 on top of our own company's donations of $25,000, allowing the fund to give back to the community in places most needed. Stephanie Liebergen has more on their story.
After a natural disaster, communities need a lot of support to help with everything from clearing debris to rebuilding. And part of that challenge is connecting generous donations to the charities on the ground that can help. Community foundations can act like a funnel for donations, taking in money and distributing it to help the area they serve. In the wake of the July 4th flash floods, the Community Foundation of the Texas Hill Country received over $60 million for its Kerr County Flood Relief Fund, and some of that money has already been distributed.
We gave to 5 volunteer fire departments in that first round, the ones that were along the Guadalupe that were right in the thick of it from July 4th on.
Some of those early funds also made it to local business owners like Tomas Valdez.
It's just a lifeline saying, hey, don't stop, don't give up. Don't give up on your dream.
The nearby Central Texas Community Foundation is managing relief funds for flood victims in Travis and Williamson counties. They estimate 600 families will qualify for help, but donations for the two counties total less than $900,000, lagging far behind hard-hit Kerr County.
Travis County, unfortunately, didn't get started until later. And the reason why is because the communities that were hit were so isolated, they were so cut off, the roads were washed out, they really had no idea what the need, what the impact was.
Donations they collect will go directly to families impacted by the flood, like Laura Glisson. Along with her husband and 6-year-old son, they had to evacuate their home in the middle of the night through waist-deep floodwaters.
But you could see a debris line, like she said, about a foot in the house. So we did lose a lot of our, all of the furniture, but just, again, I think it was that sense of we're alive.
The San Antonio Food Bank turned their regular operations into disaster relief, providing water, food, cleaning supplies, whatever they could to help reduce the stress for families.
We're not going anywhere. We're going to be there. We're going to continue to make sure their basic needs are met.
Hill Country Mental Health set up an emotional support center to give survivors a safe space to start processing their trauma.
It's natural to be angry. It's natural to be very sad. It's natural to feel guilt. Trying to normalize those emotions and help people understand that we'll meet them where they're at and when they come into the center.
And for four-legged flood survivors, Austin Pets Alive transferred over 1,100 dogs and cats back to Austin, which created space for local shelters to focus on animals lost during the flood.
They have a much higher likelihood of being reunited with their family if they just stay right where they are.
The Central Texas region has months, if not years, of recovery ahead. And these 5 nonprofits are just a few of the countless organizations that are committed to supporting this community. Stephanie Liebergen, Scripps News Group, Kerrville, Texas.
Still ahead, what is next for this part of Texas? Recovery from a major weather disaster is never easy, but its residents are already getting things going in the right direction. We have that story and more after this break. Welcome back to Scripps News' special report on the Texas flood tragedy aftermath. 1 month after floodwaters ravaged the Hill Country, the scars remain. The Guadalupe River, usually a busy summer vacation spot, is marked by debris and fallen trees. But the spirit of this community continues to shine through. But let's turn back to the early morning of July 4th when heavy rainfall caused upwards of 20 inches to fall in some areas, with nowhere for that water to drain into. Right here in Kerrville, one of the worst hit areas, 10 to 12 inches of rain fell in just a short matter of hours. Climate Central's chief meteorologist Bernadette Wood-Plackey talks about how all this happened.
This sadly had too many things come together for absolute tragedy. It was that the atmosphere was really stopped up. There were remnants of what was Tropical System Barry that were pulled up over Texas. The way the flow is going in the atmosphere, it was pulling all that additional Gulf moisture in. And then you had other highs and lows all around it in the way that it locked this system in place and wasn't allowed to go anywhere. So everything came out of it in the same place.
Scientists are calling the Texas floods a textbook example of the impact of changing climate. And now Scripps News Group's business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett joins us with more. Maura, you visited a water research lab to understand the physics behind the intense storms. What did you find?
Well, Patrick, even though the region in Texas is known as Flash Flood Alley, the storms that caused the floods were anything but expected. Climate science actually pinpoints what made these floods so devastating.
Within days of the catastrophic Texas flooding, more heavy rain triggered dangerous floods across the country, water rushing through communities in New Mexico, North Carolina, and Chicago. Some of these disasters were called 1,000-year flood events, meaning there's a 0.1% chance of occurring any given year. But what if the past is no longer a reliable guide? Scientists say the whole idea of a 1,000-year flood no longer applies because climate change has moved the goalposts.
What we're seeing is extreme events much more frequently, and it doesn't get captured by the available statistics.
Quick physics lesson. When we burn fossil fuels, which we do to power our homes and vehicles, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. That CO2 traps heat that otherwise should radiate out to space. That heat is the driver of hotter temperatures in the air and ocean. Warmer oceans evaporate faster, and warmer air holds more water in the form of humidity until it can't hold it any longer. Storms strike with that release. And CO2 isn't the only greenhouse gas that's involved in this process.
Methane, refrigerants, the things that we use in our air conditioners, in our fridges, things that are coming out of our agricultural systems and our industries. These are the super pollutants. They're both 10 to thousands of times more potent and powerful than CO2, but also last for less time in the atmosphere.
Kerr County, which took on the brunt of the floods, was also experiencing extreme to exceptional drought conditions. Those hotter air temps increase evaporation from the land and plants, making the terrain that much drier and then prone to more dangerous flooding.
We tend to get more intense precipitation, more rain in a shorter amount of time, and it overwhelms our stormwater infrastructure.
Professor Aaron Packman teaches civil environmental engineering and runs Northwestern's Water Research Lab, focusing on infrastructure solutions to reduce flooding.
The thing that we have the ability to do now that we haven't had before is much more information. What we need to expect is that there will be more floods in the future. We need to prepare for them, have better data availability, and design infrastructure specifically for future conditions.
There's also the opportunity for carbon containment, so the greenhouse gases don't get trapped in the atmosphere.
We can either start to decarbonize. We can also increase the drainage capacity. Most of the technology for permanent carbon dioxide removal is nascent, relatively small scale, and pretty expensive right now. So we need to buy ourselves time to develop in that.
Now, the key element to tracking the frequency of these weather events is data. And with the threat of more cuts to federal funding, scientists are anxious that a gap in that data could leave us even more vulnerable, Patrick.
And Maura, looking at other potential vulnerabilities, we understand that the EPA this week announced a proposal that argues the agency does not have the authority to regulate greenhouse gases. If that proposal goes through, how could it affect projects working toward the solutions that you just laid out?
Well, the proposal seeks to overturn what's called the endangerment finding, which is essentially what the federal government is able to use to take action to fight climate change, including regulating those harmful greenhouse gases. As you just saw in my piece, these are the types of emissions that turbocharge these types of disasters, but the Trump administration is trying to argue that they're not a threat. Now, this proposal is expected to face legal challenges, but if it does take effect, it'll just be the latest step in President Trump's effort to roll back former President Biden's aggressive climate agenda, and it will make it that much more difficult for future administrations to tackle greenhouse gas pollution. Patrick.
All right, Scripps News business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett. Maura, thank you. And coming up, lawmakers face community members looking for a way forward as they work to pick up the pieces of their hometown and get answers on what happens for the future of Kerr County. You're taking a look now at the Guadalupe River that our team shot recently, very different than a month ago. And we're here with a member of the United Cajun Navy. This is Captain Kevin LaFond. Captain, thanks for joining us. Give us a sense of where we are right now.
You're on the shores of the Guadalupe here where the flood happened on July 4th. We're surrounded by disaster and destruction. Some of what you see here is natural from the flood. Other is because we've come through with teams and other folks have come through with teams and cut it down to get it ready for removal. But right now we're looking at a completely changed landscape. This didn't look like any of this before.
This was an RV park.
Yeah, RV park right across here, and it didn't have that lake that was there. So now we've got a new lake that came up here. We've got new tributaries that have been cut through the flood. Water takes a path of least resistance, and it's so powerful. So there's extra little side arms now coming around, different land shapes, making islands in the middle now, and creating new choke points. In fact, one of those choke points is right over here. When the count of missing people was at 3, One of the people that was found to drop into 2 is right behind us right here.
Bodies were found here.
Yes, sir.
About how many bodies were found here?
Over 10, less than 15. I can't be too specific because the numbers change after the fact, but I can tell you it was more than 10, but less than 15.
The search for bodies goes on. What will you all be doing out here right now?
Right now we've got kind of a twofold mission. One is to identify any new tangle points that maybe weren't seen before due to terrain or topography, places maybe dogs couldn't get to. So we're flying a specialized drone today that has the ability to identify where hotspots might be so we can pinpoint it with dogs, which you don't see them out here now, they're downstream from us, but we've got dogs and many excavators ready to slowly peel these piles back if something should be targeted today so the dogs can get in there and do some sniffing.
A little girl remains among the missing.
Yes, Seal.
What is it like for you knowing that you are searching for someone's little girl?
Well, I've got a little girl of my own. She's older now, but I would come out for one little girl, let alone for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. That's been our mission, is to come and help wherever we can. We've got 2 missing people right now. We've got an adult and this young girl. It's important that we keep our eyes open even though major operations have ceased. So as we go through cleanup, this is where new things can be revealed. So it's important that we've got teams on the ground, in the air, and in the water ready to go.
Tell us about the bracelet you wear.
Yeah, these were given to me. This one actually was given to me by a little girl who lost a friend at Camp Mystic. This was given to me by a little girl who is a friend of Seal's, both Mystic girls. And so I wear these every day as just a little extra reminder next to my LSU bracelet, of course, from Louisiana. But these keep me connected in that kind of tactile way where you feel it, you fidget with it, and you just remember.
It keeps you focused on the mission.
Absolutely, and it doesn't take much, to focus on it, but in those days when you're feeling like, man, I'm tired, not exhausted, but I'm tired. Just a little bit of rub on that bracelet, like, you know what, come on guys, let's get back in there, get some water, we'll be all right, and that's what we do.
You'll be sending a drone up to take a look.
Yeah, the drone's going up here in just a few minutes, and we're in coordination with the ground teams, so consider that you got ground forces and air forces now. So we're up in the air, we're gonna survey for that cleanup work, we're gonna find spots that need to be inspected again, and we're going to have special sensors running should there be any human remains out there.
And just briefly, how have you seen things change? You were here in the early hours after the disaster. It's now been a good while. How have things changed?
Substantially. The efforts on the ground. The efforts on the ground have been very, very organized search, right? Everything from Sherps to airboats to boats in the water, planes in the sky, helicopters, people on the ground, dogs on the ground, a whole army of volunteers and workers going out there to find and search. Now we've shifted into an in-between phase where the searching has to continue on a very targeted scale. But now we've got to help the community get back into recovery mode, get into cleanup mode, making sure that they're moving forward and not dwelling.
All right, Captain, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Scripps News Group's Allison Hill joins us now in Kerr County. Allison, you were at this really intense meeting between the citizens of this area and their leadership, really pressing for answers about why they didn't have more warning.
Well, pressing is right. Texas lawmakers were pressing the local Kerr County officials, the very people many have been wanting to hear from on the hours leading up to the flood and then what followed.
On Thursday, Texas lawmakers at Ground Zero in Kerr County. The second hearing of the Texas Senate and House Select Committee on Disaster Preparedness and Flooding, raising new questions and adding to the mounting pressure on local leaders.
The 3 guys in Kerr County who were responsible for sounding the alarm were effectively unavailable. Am I hearing you right?
With that fact, and the fact that it's been 24 minutes, you want to change your response on if you think the river work system could have helped save lives?
One by one, Kerr County leaders responding.
A 3:34 a.m. call was transferred to the county, but we lacked the procedure to notify all personnel and flooding events across the jurisdictions. Our patrol team showed strong situational awareness, but broader communication is essential. Family communication during the event could have been faster.
But in this specific case, particularly the Hunt area, I don't know if sirens would have changed the outcome.
Despite that, the mayor of Kerrville is calling for warning systems to be installed along the Guadalupe River by next summer.
Allison, we're also learning that at least one of the officials was asleep during some of this flood event.
Yeah, the emergency manager for Kerr County. He told us, obviously, he wanted to clear up. There were a lot of questions about where he was while this was all unfolding in the early morning hours of July 4th. But he said he had fallen ill on July 2nd and that he was going to be out on July 3rd and was awoken by his wife around 5 a.m., hours after the floods had already come through the Texas Hill Country.
Allison Hill, thank you so much for that reporting. We'll be right back with more from Kerrville, Texas. One of the biggest tragedies, Camp Mystic. The private summer camp for girls was established back in the 1920s. Generations of families summered there. At least 27 campers and counselors lost their lives, many of the victims from the Bubble Inn cabin. More than a dozen camps line the banks of the Guadalupe River. The story different for Camp La Junita. Kelly Rabin's sons, Braden and Brock Davis, saw the water rise while her oldest son, Braden's cabin, did not flood. Her youngest sons did, and she describes what was going through her mind as she drove toward Hill Country.
I just had this mom instinct that something was wrong with him. And sure enough, he was in one of the 3 cabins that flooded, so much so that he had to climb from the lower bunk to the upper bunk to then be lifted into the rafters by the very brave counselors. Of course, I didn't know all that definitively or at all when I was on the way there, but mom instinct is something. So once I was able to get my eyes on the boys and my arms wrapped around them, I was just filled with all the emotions. It's something that I could have never expected to happen, and really, an indescribable feeling of gratitude, but also of anguish and sadness for those who, I knew wouldn't be hugging their child that night or maybe ever.
What happened in early July and why it happened. Let's talk now more about the future of this community. And let's bring back Scripps News correspondent Michael Anthony Adams. Michael, you've spent so much time with the people of this community, and you were right here right after everything happened.
Yeah.
I want you to reflect a little bit about those early days and then where this community has come.
I've covered a lot of wildfires, and in a wildfire, oftentimes everything is left to ash, so you don't have these large debris piles. And I think what I was so struck by when I came here was just seeing everyone's belongings strewn along the river. I mean, it was so visceral, being able to see the remnants of somebody's life just on full display. And 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, so much has changed here. I mean, yes, lots of things have cleaned up, but I also feel like this community is starting to rebuild itself, the heart that it had. And you can really feel that as you're talking to people like Dondi, who are out there collecting every little bit of all of what's left and trying to get people back to this place of the before, what she calls it.
The victims, so many of them children.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking, and you see it walking around the streets, the people in the community as they look at the memorials.
Yeah.
It makes it so much more difficult to fathom that this happened when the victims are so young.
One of the things that I was able to witness, and it was so sad, was, Dondi gets calls every day. And that moment when she got a call from a father who had lost loved ones in this, not even knowing that was who was calling, but having young children gone forever, not being able to see them again, but looking for those pieces, those pieces of their life, to hold on to and to move into the future. And I think that is where the hope comes from.
And you have to think that something like this in the future will be so different. When there is that talk of a potential flooding event, this community will carry lessons with them.
Absolutely.
Maybe these deaths hopefully will not have been in vain.
A lot of the survivors that I did talk to, I mean, they were honest. They said, we did get alerts, and we get alerts all the time. It's totally normal. And so I think those alerts will mean something a little bit different this time around.
Absolutely. And as we just take a look around, it is so beautiful here now. It's just unthinkable that this was a scene of so much tragedy.
And I think that's something important to remember. People come to this area, people come to Hill Country for the beauty. It's a beautiful place. And I was flying the drone yesterday, and I was thinking about that, and I was actually talking to my wife about it too. It is so beautiful to see it from above, and I just hope that this community gets back to normal or a new normal for them.
Michael Anthony Adams, thank you so much. And we will be right back with more and continuing to track the rebuilding here in Texas Hill Country as the community heals and moves on. Thank you for watching.